Aussizz Group on Collins Street. Thank you for joining this live session. I'm going to be talking about some of the important aspects of skill assessments. I'll be discussing some of very important aspects for the employer-sponsored visas. And the skill assessments, mainly, I'm going to be touching base on how the skill assessments are required for the state nominations, for the general skilled visas, and plus including the employer-sponsored visas as well. I'll also cover some of the most common questions for the skill assessments that I get from my clients. And if you have any questions, please feel free to message me on the link below, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. If I'm not able to answer the questions, then you can contact me on my mobile number here after the session. You can message me or WhatsApp me, and I'm more than happy to have a consultation or have a chat with you regarding your situation. So again, hello everyone, my name is Gunjan and I'm a registered migration agent. I specialize in employer-sponsored visas, skilled migration, state nomination, partner visas, and business visas. So you can contact me for any questions. So now let's talk about the skill assessments. Now, one of the usually common questions I get is that why do I need a skill assessment? And what's the relevance of skill assessment? And do I even need a skill assessment for lodging an expression of interest? So I'll touch base on the skill assessment authorities as well, and what are the requirements of each skill assessment authorities. I'll cover some of the occupations, and please share this live session group with your friends so they can also get information regarding the skill assessment, state nomination, and the employer-sponsored visas. Okay, so skill assessment is basically, when you talk about skill assessment, the department wants to see whether your qualifications and skills meet the standards of the Australian requirement. So for example, let's say if you're an accountant and you've done a bachelor's or a master's degree of accountancy from overseas or Australia, first of all, a lot of people think that to get a skill assessment, you only need to have qualification in Australia. That's not true. That's why there's an offshore skill migration program. So if you have an offshore degree, offshore means outside Australia. And when I say onshore, that means in Australia. So when you have a degree offshore, that means you have a degree in the country of your usual residence. For example, let's say Bachelor's of Accountancy. So Skill Assessment Authority, CPA. So every occupation has its own skill assessment authority. For example, nursing, that's done registration is through APRA, and ANMAC is the skill assessment authority. Let's say the trade occupations, motor mechanics, painting trade workers, welders, their skill assessment authorities, Trade Recognition of Australia. VETASIS also does some of the trade occupations, depending on the country of passport. So there's a migration skill pathway, there's a job ready program for the students who have completed their skill assessments, who have completed their qualifications in Australia. So each qualification, each nominated occupation has their own skill assessment authority. Now, it is your responsibility to check or consult a registered migration agent that which occupation you fall into and which skill assessment authority you are eligible for. So let's say, for example, I have clients who have done their IT occupations. So IT is very broad. It's like really broad. You have your business analyst, system analyst, developer programmers, software engineers, computer network system engineers. So you need to be careful that which occupation you are eligible for. The skill assessment authority is Australian Computing Society. This does the IT occupation skill assessment. So you need to be careful that what you're applying for and you're applying to the right assessing authority. The obtaining a skill assessment, which is a very a common question that I get, that do I need a skill assessment? So obtaining a skill assessment is mandatory for most of the visa subclasses. It depends on the stream that you're applying for. So for example, when you talk about the skilled migration program, the expression of interest is the first step. So basically you're applying for expression of interest for either a 189 or a 190 or 491. So skill assessment is mandatory for the expression of interest. Now, also, how do you check the eligibility for each skill assessment. All skill assessment authorities have their websites. I'm not saying that you check all the eligibilities yourself, and you're not supposed to understand, because there are a lot of things which are confusing. So that's the reason you need to consult a migration agent. But also, I always recommend my clients that you go to the assessing website, you go to the particular state nomination website and do your own research as well, and try to check your eligibility yourself as well. And obviously, if you have questions, then we are there. If you get stuck, we are there. But don't, if you're confused anywhere, then always consult a migration agent before you proceed with the lodgement, because there's time and money involved when you're lodging, especially with ACS. They take 10 to 12 weeks for processing an application. And even if you have one document missing, the Australian Computing Society is pretty much a bit strict on the documentation. They may give you a decision straight away. They may not ask for additional documents. So you need to be careful with that. Now, when you receive your skill assessment, what about the validity of the skill assessment? Usually the skill assessment is valid for 3 years from the date it's issued, or the expiry date should be written on your skill assessment document. If it's not written, then by default, it's valid for 3 years. The skill assessment, when you get the skill assessment from the assessing authority, it should clearly show your nominated occupation. It should clearly show in case you have applied for employment assessment. Now, let's talk about the employment assessment. One is your qualification assessment. So I'll give examples when I'm talking about skill assessment and the employment assessment. So let's say if you have done your bachelor's of computer science in specialization in software engineering. So you get your qualification assessed. If you have 5 years of experience after your qualification or before your qualification, you submit your skill assessment with employment with the ACS, Australian Computing Society, saying that I want my employment to be assessed to claim points. So that's one of the requirements, that you should have your employment reference letter, pay slips, tax returns. So there are a lot of things involved in the employment assessment where you need to prove that you were in a paid employment full-time with a salary of this much when you apply for a skill assessment, including the employment assessment. Now, let's talk about the visas with the skill assessment, that how the skill assessments are linked to the visas. When I talk about this general skill migration, everybody knows that 190 state nomination, and everybody is curious about which states are closed, which states are open. Should we move from Victoria? Some people are already in Victoria, so they are confused that should we move from this state or should we stay in that state? Now, 190 is state nominated pathway. What it means is that you must be invited from a state to and be eligible to apply for a state, and you should be invited from a state to apply for the 190 visa. So let's, for example, say Victoria is now closed and they will reopen in July. And a lot of people are confused that would they still have the same STEM skills? STEM is like science, technology, engineering, and medicine. So a lot of people think that will it change? So it's like not really clear whether they will still have the same occupations in demand, or they will only ask for the target sectors. So the target sector by advanced manufacturing, health, medical, renewable energy. So these were some of the target sectors. So if you're already working in a target sector, I do recommend that you continue your job in the target sector and wait for the Victoria state nomination and see whether they have the same eligibility, and then accordingly you can decide whether you want to relocate or not. At the same time, keep in mind that, for example, I had a client in the afternoon. I cannot give like the names and everything because of the confidentiality. However, similar situation everybody faces, like if you have a company, let's say ABC, and you're working as a mechanical engineer in Victoria, and you also have a branch in Western Australia in Perth. So the Western Australia recently also updated their list, and there were a lot of new occupations added in the list. So the Western Australia says, especially for Schedule 2, that they have a graduate pathway, they have a Schedule 1, they have a Schedule 2, and then they have a regional pathway as well. So with the Western Australia Schedule 2, for example, if you're living in Melbourne and you have an organization, a company branch in Western Australia, and your company is happy to relocate you to Western Australia, which means that if you have a 12-month contract, the schedules say that you must have a 12-month contract in Western Australia in order to be sponsored by the state. So then obviously, if you're already working as a mechanical engineer and if you have an employment contract, then you can look at the options for Western Australia 190. Keep in mind that the Western Australia first prioritizes candidates who are already working in Western Australia. So Western Australia has a ranking system. So their preference is for applicants currently residing in Western Australia, following those who are working and residing in Australia, anywhere in Australia, and then they give options to the someone residing overseas. Now, if you're watching this session and you're outside Australia, like I've got clients from Fiji, India, everywhere. And if I have got skill assessment recently approved, for example, let's say as a contract administrator. So if contract administrator is listed in Western Australia, I highly recommend that I apply for the client for an expression of interest, because my client has 8 years of experience. And what if someone already living in Western Australia doesn't have a job, or is just like a contract job? So they do prefer people living in Western Australia. However, they may also pick someone offshore with, let's say, a 95 or 100 points as a contract administrator, or any occupation that is actually listed on the Western Australia website. So they may pick someone who's outside. Similarly, some of the states have closed and some of the states are still open. So if your occupation falls under any of the state nominated criteria, then I encourage to apply. I'll try to take some questions in between that I've got. Malit is saying, can you tell about Western Australia? So Malit, Western Australia, we just had a session previously on Western Australia. So I do recommend that you can also go back and check that session. However, like I said, Western Australia has updated the combined occupation list for Schedule 1, Schedule 2, and the graduate list. Some of the new occupations that are added are arborist, architects, architectural draft person, arts manager, cabler, and cardiologist, carpenter, which is a good thing. That's a recently added occupation, but that's in the graduate list. So you need to be careful. The Western Australia state has a sheet on their website. If you go to migration.wa.gov.au and you click on the state nomination requirements, you can actually see the state nomination requirements and how they have listed on the right hand side regional WA, Schedule 1, Schedule 2. So Schedule 1, Schedule 2 have different requirements. So if you are, Malit, are you in Melbourne or you're interstate, you can get in touch with me and we can discuss your eligibility for the Western Australia as well. What are the chances for mechanical engineer for 85 points for 190? Living in West Australia for general. So Schedule 2, it says that you should have an employment contract for minimum 12 months. So if you are a mechanical engineer, then you can look for the employment contract with the company. So like I said, they will always prioritize candidates. So if you are putting an expression of interest sitting in Victoria for Western Australia, I would recommend that you live and work in Western Australia, and then you can also put the expression of interest, because like I said, they will prioritize candidates who are already living and working in Western Australia. What is the meaning of endorsed correlation to ANSCO? You can see statement under civil, mechanical, and electrical engineering technologist. So Vikrant, are you talking about which website have you seen endorsed correlation to ANSCO? So it's ASCO, I think you mean ANSCO. So if you can send me the link, I can have a look and I can explain you better. I'll take some questions after some time. And like I said, please feel free to share the live link with your friends and the students that are studying with you, so that we can help them and regarding their questions as well. So now I've spoken about the skill assessments. Like I said, all my students, they're very knowledgeable, and they know, okay, so you guys have studied your courses. For example, let's say if you're a chef or an engineer, you have to get a skill assessment done. But how you have to utilize that skill assessment, that is important. So at the end of the day, if you have a skill assessment and you are sitting, so I have clients who come to me, my skill assessment is already expiring. I'm like, it's been 2 years, but you haven't probably took the right remedy or right actions to apply for the state nomination or even for the employer sponsored visas. So when we talk about the general skilled migration, so there's a 189. A lot of people already know there are not many invitations coming for 189, the independent. But let's see what happens at the end of financial year now that the government is changing. So let's hope that they do something better for the Australian migrants who are already here and who want to migrate. So let's see whether they open up the 189 invitations or not. When we talk about 190, I already explained that you have to be sponsored by a particular state. And it gives you extra 5 points depending on, and any state you apply, you get extra 5 points, but depending on the occupation you apply. But don't apply for the expression of interest and just wait for the invitation. Sometimes, for example, let's talk about again Western Australia. If you are here in Australia and you apply for expression of interest, just don't sit and wait for the invitations. Look for other options as well. Now, we talk about 491. 491 is regional. There's a lot of people who get confused between, they think the same eligibility is everywhere for 491, which is not true. So Victoria has its own eligibility for 491. Western Australia has its own eligibility. Tasmania has its own eligibility for 491, and similar to Northern Territory as well. So every state has its own eligibility. Now, with the skill assessment, let's talk about employer-sponsored visas. If you're working in a company, in brief, the employer-sponsored visas you divide into training visa, 186 and 482. The difference between these three categories, 407 as itself, in the word itself says training. So the company, all three subclasses, you need an employer because it's an employer-sponsored visa. So training visa 407, that means your company is hiring you or nominating you to train you. I'll pick an example of, let's say, a system analyst. So if you're working in an IT company, the company says that, okay, we are happy to train you. So the difference is that they are not hiring a skilled person, somebody with 3-4 years of experience. They're hiring someone to be trained to upskill the client, to upskill the applicant. So the eligibility for training visa is that you need 12 months of experience in the last 24 months, or you can also utilize your 12 months of study. So let's say you completed your bachelor's of IT in the last 2 years, you don't need employment. You can utilize the 12 months of study. So it's either 12 months of study or it's 12 months of work experience. So that's for training visa. The training visa, again, is categorized into sponsorship nomination visa. You can't lodge the visa directly. The company has to be an approved sponsor. You have to lodge the 407 sponsorship, then the 407 nomination, and then the 407 visa. That's a training visa. You can lodge up to 2 years, but I recommend that you consult a migration agent before you lodge the training visa for 2 years. For example, if you already have 2 years of experience, so it's not pretty much reasonable to ask the department that this applicant needs to be trained for another 2 years. So I recommend that you lodge, probably in this kind of situation, lodge for 12 months. Depending on your situation, I would recommend whether you lodge it for 6 months, 12 months, or 2 years. When we talk about the 482, so that was a training visa. The 482 is a skilled visa. So basically, the company is hiring a skilled person. So when they're hiring a skilled person, that means that you already have 2 years of experience. That's the benchmark. The 2 years of minimum experience you need. Let's take another example of a mechanical engineer. Let's say your company wants to sponsor you as a mechanical engineer and your visa is expiring in the month of July. You complete your 2 years experience in just nearby June and July. So with the visa applicant, so you're the visa applicant, you need 2 years of experience. You have to meet English requirements and plus your qualification. So you need to have a bachelor's or master's. The work experience may or may not be after qualification. There can be some work experience you may be able to use prior to the just while you are studying as well, but depends on the occupation. Right. Now, with the employment, the employer requirements, there are a lot of employment requirements. So similar to 407, you need to understand that you also have to have the employer approved as a sponsor. So the business has to apply for business sponsorship. I will also mention the documents that you will be, some of the documents that you will be required. So 482 sponsorship is a temporary visa. So 482 visa is a temporary visa. It's not a permanent visa. Initially, like I mentioned, the skilled occupation list is divided into medium short-term list. If your occupation is in a short-term list, you can apply for visa for 2 years plus 2 years extension. If you're in a medium term, then you can directly apply for 186 direct entry, or you can apply for 482 for 2, 3, or 4 years. Depending on your occupation, I'll be able to suggest you whether you apply for the visa for the 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. Some of the documents required for standard business sponsorship will be your business registration or ACN certificate, or if the company is a trust, then you may need a trustee deed as well. If the company have different franchises, if there's a franchisee agreement, if applicable, then you will need that. The financial documents are very important for this business sponsorship, because that's the main documents for 482 sponsorship of companies, that they need to see that the company is financially stable to apply and be approved as a business sponsor. So you will be providing the department with latest profit and loss statement, full financial report, or for the most recent financial year. And last, for business activity statements for the business. These are the financial documents that you will be applying. Some of the cases you may have to submit a lease agreement that the business exists. For example, if there's a workshop and the company is operating and hiring motor mechanics, and it's a small workshop, so the department may ask for a lease agreement, depending on case-by-case basis. Not always you have to submit a lease agreement, but it is recommended that you keep the documents ready. The more documents, the accurate documents you submit, more the application is decision ready, more chances of approval, and obviously the processing time is shorter, because then they don't ask for further documents. So I try to lodge a decision ready application. Now, when we talk about the 482, the next step is the 482 nomination. Also, going back to the skill assessment, not all occupations need a skill assessment for 482. Depending on your country of passport, depending on your occupation, you may not be needing a skill assessment. So if you just have work experience, let's say if you have a certificate 4 in commercial cookery or a diploma of hospitality, and you have 2 or 3 years of experience, so let me know, and then I will advise whether you need a skill assessment. You may not need a skill assessment to lodge a 482. So you can get over that hassle of getting a skill assessment. Now, when it comes to the 482 nomination, these documents are very, very important. When we talk about nomination, even for 186, so for 186, there is no sponsorship. 482, there's a sponsorship, or for 186, there is no sponsorship. For 186 permanent residency, so 186 is an employer nomination scheme, which is a permanent residency. So when you talk about employer nomination or 482 nomination, most of the documents are quite similar. So that's the reason I'm going to talk about the documents required for the employer nomination stage and the 482 nomination, because most of the documents are quite similar depending on the occupation as well. Now, I'll take 1 or 2 questions before I talk about the nomination documents. Most of the questions are about skilled migration. Why I'm touching base on the employer sponsored more is that because a lot of people get confused with the employer sponsored training visa. Not many people even know and encourage about the training visa as well. A lot of people think I don't have 2 years, 3 years of experience, I'm not eligible for any employer sponsored visa, which is not correct. And I always encourage my clients to talk to the employers about the training visa. And if you want, even I can have a chat with your employer. Most of the times they have a lot of questions, only obviously I can answer them as a registered agent. All right. Kesang is asking, good afternoon. How can I start my skill assessment for Baker? How much does it cost and how long is going to take? So Baker, it depends on your country of passport as well. The assessing authority would be the Trade Recognition of Australia, TRA, or VETSS, depending on the pathway. The trade, you can apply for skill assessment. You need a qualification depending on the pathway. So even if you have only 3 or 5 years of experience, you may be waived the qualification requirement, or some sort of training would also do. So you can email me your resume or email me your details. I will mention my email address. You can get in touch with me, or you can inbox me, and then I can check your eligibility about the requirements of a baker. Similar, it's good that you asked this question, because I have chefs from offshore, from all over the place outside Australia, somebody with 10 years of experience working in a restaurant as a chef. So done a diploma or a certificate, get the skill assessment done, and then we can look for offshore state nomination 19491. So there are a lot of states, like for example, Western Australia, they just recently added agricultural consultant. And I've got an agricultural consultant from Fiji, got her skill assessment. Now I can apply for an expression of interest for Western Australia. South Australia also has some offshore programs. So Baker, get your skill assessment done. I've left my email address. You can email me your details. Right. Hamid is asking, I'm working as a system analyst and completing my 2 years of experience in November. Okay, and your visa is expiring in next year. So that's good that you have that gap. Employer is ready to sponsor, whether it should go for 190, 189. I need to spend money and time for NATI. So system analyst in the Victoria right now, it's closed. So Hamid, are you in Melbourne, or which state are you in? So when you put questions, I would encourage just write the state as well. So it's easier for me to explain you the eligibility regarding the state nominations. If your employer is happy to sponsor you, your TR expires in August 2023. So just check when you complete your 3 years of experience, and then you can ask your employer to sponsor you on a 186 direct entry. So the eligibility for 186 direct entry, employer sponsored visa, is your qualification plus 3 years of experience. So you are in New South Wales, right? Yeah, New South Wales, for most occupations, they added 3 years of work experience. So you might have got stuck there. Employer is happy to sponsor you. So you get 3 years of experience, where you don't need to immediately lodge your 482 with 2 years of experience, because your visa is still left till August 2023. So that's not too bad. You can get in touch with me, and we can have a visa consultation and discuss your state nomination options. And you can meanwhile get your employer ready as well with the documents, and we can apply for their sponsorship. Rajan is asking, any chance to get 190 visa from accountant living in Western Australia? So Western Australia, again, like I said, they have a graduate list. So accountant is there in 19491 and the graduate pathway. Now, if you go to the graduate stream pathway, and what happens to EOI when PT expires? So if your PT is expired, you need to give the PT again and update your EOI, because if your PT is not valid at the time of invitation, then you may not be able to lodge your visa. So keep in mind that when you're lodging your expression of interest, always keep in mind the expiry date of your professional year, NATI, your skill assessment, and your English. So if it's expired, you need to update your EOI, because if you get invited, that document is not valid anymore. So you can't use that document. How many points for graduate diploma in early childhood education? The points depends, Bhumi, on the state, of course. Like the early childhood pre-primary school teacher, the Victoria had opened the pathway. There were not like a lot of invitations, so we were not really happy with the invites that they did for Victoria. Hopefully after June they do better. But points, I do recommend that, yes, try to increase your points by giving NATI if you're one of the eligible passport holders for NATI, and do your professional year program if you're eligible for those extra 5 points. And superior English, take some coaching classes, and because any areas that you can increase and maximize your points. Not all states are completely focused on points, But most of the states do also at the same time look at the higher points, like Victoria, South Australia may look at the points as well. Northern Territory 190, sometimes they prefer graduates, so sometimes they probably won't really care how much you have, 70 points as far as you have met the graduate pathway. Bhanu is asking, do I need the contract letter in Western Australia after being invited? I'm already living in Western Australia, finding a job. I mean, you can apply for the expression of interest, but I still do recommend that there's a reason why there's an eligibility criteria that you need to meet. But you can, at the time of nomination, you can provide the employment contract. But if you think that it's going to be like really, really difficult to get the employment, then don't just submit the expression of interest just for submitting it. If you have any chances of contract, then you apply for the expression of interest. Hope that answers your question, Bhanu. Or you can get in touch with me for other state nomination requirements as well. Gibran is asking, could you please explain about 188 business visa? So Gibran, it depends on the 188 which stream you're going for. It's a very broad category. There's a minimum investment that you have to do, which could be 1.25 million, or depending on which stream you're applying for, whether it's 188 A, B, or C, and which state you want to invest that money. So there's a very broad category. You can get in touch with me and we can discuss that in detail. I can do the initial assessment for your business visa. It also depends, are you transferring an existing business, or you are investing, or you're buying a business, and which state you are buying a business. Most of the business visa would also need a skill assessment to be done. Hamid is saying, I might get 3 years of experience for 186 is not sufficient to get 3 years. What we can do is, Hamid, we can lodge a 482 for 1 year. Just remove this background noise. Yeah. So what we can do is we can lodge a 482 for 1 year or 1 or 2 years, and while you're on the 482 on a bridging visa A, you can continue to work. So we can plan something accordingly like that, or lodge some other visa to keep working and complete your 3 years of work experience. Right. Vishal is saying, I've done mechanical engineering in overseas and 6 years of experience, moved to Australia with the wife. Can I get sponsorship and skilled visa? So I understand that you have done mechanical engineering, so you would have your skill assessment. As a mechanical engineer, Vishal, so have you moved here on a student visa or sponsorship? Yes, if your employer is happy to sponsor you. 3 years of experience as a mechanical engineer, which is really good. You've got 6+ years, so minimum eligibility is 3 years. So if your employer is happy to sponsor you. One more thing I would like to highlight is, a lot of people think when I say 3 years of experience, they say, oh, do I have to be working with the same employer for 3 years? No, that's not right. The 3 years of experience can be anywhere in the world. It can be in Australia, it can be outside, and can be with different employers, as far as you're able to justify those 3 years of experience with your pay slips, tax return, employment reference letters. So it doesn't need to be just in Australia. Okay. Hello, I'm offshore in Uganda, a CP in Uganda with 5 years of it. Do I qualify for 190? 190 Katambang, it depends on which state is sponsoring accountants. It depends. Western Australia just added offshore. So I would do your skill assessment and apply for expression of interest for Western Australia, Katamba. So email me your resume and let's do your skill assessment, but I need to check your mark sheets and your syllabus, whether you got the mandatory subjects, because the CPA, who does the assessing, who's the assessing authority for accountants or tax accountants, external auditors, they check your syllabus. You have to study some mandatory subjects and 7 each in English, the English test result. Right. let me take one or two more questions, and then I'll get on to the 186 nomination. I usually send the document, a brief checklist to my clients, just to see whether they are able to. There are some companies don't want to disclose their financial documents, so that's why I always say, okay, this is the documents required. Would you be able to provide these documents? Then only we proceed. Right. Let me talk about the nomination documents again in brief. When you talk about the 186 or 482 or for training visa, you need a position description. The position description document would be your position title, the duties and responsibilities, what are the tasks that you're going to be performing. That will be the position description. Organization chart. The organization chart is required basically by the department to see whether you have any other, for example, let's say a motor mechanic, and there's a big workshop. There are already 5 motor mechanics working there. So they want to see that why you are nominating a 6th motor mechanic. What is the need of another motor mechanic? Is there a business expansion, or is it like, what is it about? Why you want to hire? So that's where the organization chart you have to mention. One of the most important document is the genuine position letter. Genuine position letter means that why you need the employee for the position, whether you advertise the position and there were no suitable candidates, which is called the labor market testing. Labor market testing is that they've tested the market. They couldn't find any resident citizens, and they are not skilled enough. And that's why we are hiring this person who is not a resident, and we wish to nominate that person. Another important thing is that whether that position previously existed in the company or it's a new position. That is also very relevant. I'll take some questions because I see that there are a lot of questions. So I want to answer as much as I can so that it can help you guys. I have a skill assessment in electrical draft person, but I don't have work experience. Okay, so you have an experience. Okay, you have skill assessment. So have you studied in Western Australia, Thinley? That will be important to know whether you fall under which category. So Western Australia is divided into different categories. The Schedule 1 requirements, general stream Schedule 2 requirements, and the graduate stream requirement. So you will have to check what category you come into and whether your occupation is available on the Western Australia list or not. So we can have a consultation regarding that. Also, a lot of things. The first thing I ask is that, so you studied in Western Australia, so you have to look at the graduate occupation list, whether your occupation falls under the graduate list or not. However, depends on the points. When is your visa expiring? How much time have you got left to apply for the state nomination? With no work experience, there are mostly the states prefer candidates who are already working and living in that state in their nominated occupation. The whole purpose of the state nomination is that that state wants you to reside there. So at the end of the day, they see that which candidate is going to stay in our state, and that's we're going to be sponsoring that candidate. Right. So, okay. I have done RPL and my skill assessment and got positive result. I have 4 years of experience and 1 in Australia. So which skill assessment do you have? My employer is ready to sponsor me for 186. But the agent is saying that I'm not eligible as my international experience. My query is that international experience, I did my skill assessment for chef. No, that doesn't seem 100% correct, that your work experience will not be counted if it's overseas. I'm not sure what you have been advised. If you have your qualification and your 3 years of experience. So I think what has happened is that I'll have to check that which 3 years get deducted. So for example, it might sound a bit confusing because I can't go in so much detail over here. Chahana. But what happens is when you get a skill assessment through RPL, whether it's chef or a mechanic, any trade, so you have utilized the first 3 years to get that RPL document. So sometimes what happens is the 3 years required for the 186 direct entry will be counted from after those 3 years that you have already utilized. So that may be the case. We can have a chat and then we can discuss your eligibility, but it's good that you're checking so you just don't lodge it. There's a lot of money involved in 186 for the employer and you as well. Right. Okay, Salman is saying, my company already applied for 482 visa in a network analyst. I have 3 years of experience and my degree is assessed in telecommunication engineer. You can apply for 186 visa. However, your degree is in telecommunication engineer. So all right. So you need to have a relevant skill assessment in the occupation that your company wants to sponsor you. So as I understand that your degree is in telecommunication engineer, but your company has applied for a network or a system analyst, you mean to say, or a network administrator, and 3 years of experience. So I'll have to check and discuss that with you in detail so we can come to a conclusion that which occupation you should be applying for the 186 visa. Right. Let me see if there's more questions related to the employer sponsored. Do I need a diploma for 186 direct entry even if I have done a certificate for in commercial cookery? Depends on the occupation. Right. So is your employer ready to sponsor you as a chef or a cook or a restaurant manager? How much experience do you have? So a lot of things matter for the employer nomination. My company sponsored people 5 years ago. Is there any expiry for the business sponsorship? So if it has an expiry date, then the business has to renew their sponsorship. The sponsorship is not a lifetime sponsorship. Usually the business is approved for 5 years. If the sponsorship is expired, do not lodge the nomination without checking if the business sponsorship has expired, because if the business has sponsorship has expired, your nomination will be refused and you may not be given a chance to provide the business sponsorship. So it's a check with the company. Okay, is our migration age? I'm not sure about the other company, so I can't really comment and discuss about other firms over here, but I'll try to answer your question. If I'm not able to, then you can get in touch with me for the consultation. You can email me, or my contact number is written on this as well. What are the chances of getting PR for computer network and system engineer in New South Wales, other states? South Australia could be a good state for computer network. Western Australia just opened up as well. Tasmania, Northern Territory, most of the states are open, but it depends at the employment eligibility, that are you like going to be eligible for that particular state or not. So let's say South Australia, they have a particular requirement for the every occupation. They say whether you have 6 months or 12 months experience or 18 months experience. So it depends on the state. Right. So as I suggested, that the 186 nomination or the 482 nomination is a very critical aspect based on the position genuineness, market salary rate, and the labor market testing. Labor market testing is not mandatory for 186 visa. However, it's written in the policy that the case officer may make a decision on the basis of the labor market testing. Can I count nursing placement hours for 482 experiences? So Are you talking about the enrolled nurse? So 482 visa, you need 2 years of experience. So if the placement was paid and not casual, casual may not be considered. It was a part-time. For example, if you worked for 1 year part-time, it may be considered 6 months full-time on a pro rata basis. Otherwise, you need full-time. So it depends. Right. So Western Australia, Bijay, like I said, they have different categories, so we'll have to check whether which category you fall into. If it's a general stream for Western Australia with full-time employment, if you have a full-time employment, then I recommend that you lodge your expression of interest, at least the EOI for Western Australia. So they may consider you. 85 points is not a bad point, but try to increase your points. Maybe you can give your NATI or superior English and check where are you lacking the points, because you could reach 90 to 95 points, which is a good score. And depends when is your visa expiring, so you can look at other state nominations as well. Right. I'll discuss some of the position genuineness requirements as well. When was the business established is very important. Let's say, for example, if someone has opened a new restaurant like just 3 months and you don't have a business activity statement, it's not recommended. You should have at least 1 or 2 BAS business activity statement before you lodge a sponsorship or before you nominate someone for the position. The size and scale of the business matters a lot. If there are only 2 people working in the business, so I might have to justify that why is the third person needed for the business, and how much is the turnover. The turnover needs to be good as well. The business shouldn't be going into loss for the last 3-4 years. There have been businesses that have been going into loss, but that doesn't mean that you cannot sponsor the person, the candidate. It doesn't mean that they cannot sponsor. They can still sponsor, showing a business expansion, that what ideas they have to expand the business and why the business was going into loss. So that's one aspect I wanted to touch. Right. So I would want to touch on the risk factors and refusal factors that come into picture for the 482 or 186. Number one, like everybody talks about the eligibility, but I thought I will touch base on the risk factors. So if you're a relative of the business owner, so for example, if you are sponsoring your sister or your brother, so that could be a little bit risky if it's a blood relation. Second reason of refusal, mostly why when people come to me with their nomination refusals, that there are many foreign workers employed in the business and very few Australian employees. So let's say there's a restaurant. There are 10 people working, 9 of them are casual on student visas or temporary workers. There is no Australian employee in the business. That could be a little bit risky. The third reason of refusal generally I've seen is that the business didn't made any recruitment efforts for the role, or they just placed an ad on just Indeed. They didn't put a job advertise, which is local website advertised. They didn't place job advertisements on a seek.com or job active, which is mandatory for 482. So they didn't post a job on the reputable source, indicates that there is an average or above average unemployment in the nominated occupation. So if they haven't made efforts, the right efforts to look for the right candidate, it could be a reason of refusal as well. Also, when the employers is looking for the nominated candidate, you need to see the specific skills and experience required. So let's say if the skills required are 5 years of experience and your client only has 2 years of experience, and there are so many candidates who applied with 2 years of experience. So the employers need to justify that why they didn't hire the other candidates who applied and why they're hiring you. Right. So placement done as a part of Bachelor's of Nursing course. You may be able to, because not for 186, you cannot count that, but for 482, you may be able to. Right. I want to know about 190 for registered nurse who is working in hospital in Western Australia. So I can go back and check the requirements for Western Australia. But as far as I know, that the Western Australia nursing is a very in occupation in high demand. So if you are already working and residing in Western Australia, working as a nurse, then I recommend that you apply for the Western Australia 190. Are you residing currently in Western Australia, or you have a job offer already? And which state are you residing? Let me know and we can discuss accordingly. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, or I will leave my details at the bottom, and then later on you can contact me for any questions. And even if you have friends, relatives outside Australia, and they are qualified IT engineers, teachers, nurses, trade qualifications, motor mechanic, I encourage you that you tell them that if they are eligible, they can apply for the skill assessment, because there are a lot of states now, they are opening for the offshore program. So if you have a skill assessment ready, then at the right time, you may be able to apply for the state nomination. Okay, Vidya is asking, I'm a registered nurse. End of this month, I'll be completing 3 years full-time of nursing. If an employer willing to sponsor me, so 186, you need 3 years of work experience, dear. So 186, 3 years full-time work experience. 482, you need 2 years of work experience. So Vidya, if you have your visa left, maybe you can complete your 3 years and then apply for 186 if the employer is happy to sponsor you, or you can apply for 482 as well. I would recommend you apply for 482, because what happens is that when you are on a 482 visa, that means you're already working on a skill level. So when you're already working at a skill level, then it makes it easier for you to justify that I've been working in the company skill level or 1 year, and now the same wants to sponsor me. So that makes it easier as well. Right. So can I claim 5 points if I'm working 20 hours per week for 52 weeks in casual employment? You can claim 5 points, yes. But still, I would recommend to discuss once on your, it has to be a paid employment and 20 hours per week. Yes, you can claim 5 points from the department. You can get your skill assessment. When you get your skill assessment done, get your employment assessed as well. If it's better assessed, then get your employment assessed. All right. If you guys have any questions, I'll leave my email address at the bottom after this. And feel free to email me or call me or WhatsApp me if you want to book an appointment. I can have a chat with you for a few minutes and see what's your visa pathway. And Aussizz Group, we specialize in all visas. And I remember I had someone asking me about the business visa, so I can do your initial assessment about the business visa as well. I'll take one more question. Raj is asking, requirement for the company to apply for nomination. So Raj, I just went through some of the very important aspects so you can maybe see the session after the session has ended. Nomination is position genuineness, why the company needs to sponsor you. Market salary rate, why the company is paying you this much of salary. And third, the labor market testing. So labor market testing, that they have tried to recruit someone outside the job advertisement for 28 days. These are the basic requirement: profit and loss, business activity statements, organization chart, position description. You can get in touch with me. I can provide you with some document list. I'm happy to share what is required, because at the end of the day, you and the company has to know what documents we'll be giving before I start the process with you. Thank you, everyone, for watching this session. I really appreciate your time. And I always recommend my clients that to plan your visa ahead. If your visa is expiring in 1 month, 2 months, don't leave it for the last minute, because it's really hard to get the state nomination. And 189, there are very, very less invites. There are no invites at the moment. So focus on 190, focus on 491. focus on the employer-sponsored visas, and so you can have a pathway towards your permanent residency in Australia. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.